Why has New York City defied the Great American Crime Decline? Crime has been falling nationally for more than a year. Real-time crime index statistics from nearly 400 U.S. cities now show violent crime to be lower and property crime much lower than before the pandemic. Crime has been falling lately in New York City, too, but it's still much worse than 5 years ago. What's going on? The most honest answer is explaining a crime wave is hard. But some explanations do fit the data better than others. For example, there's research linking public outrage over killings by police to crime increases, as police pull back on enforcement in the face of protests and political backlash, the so-called Ferguson effect. The jump in violent crime in Minneapolis after a police officer murdered George Floyd in May 2020 certainly seems to fit that explanation. But while New York also saw large protests in the wake of Floyd's killing, its violent crime wave started more than a year later. No clear Ferguson effect there. An economic explanation is perhaps a better fit. New York was hit harder by the pandemic than the rest of the country, and the city's unemployment rate has remained higher. Before the pandemic, it was nearly identical to the nation's. What about Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg? His progressive policies and successful prosecution of President Donald Trump have made him a nationally prominent target of criticism. But violent crime has increased much less in Manhattan since Bragg took office at the beginning of 2022 than in the rest of New York City. So he's probably not to blame. Then there's the bail reform enacted in 2019 by the New York State Legislature and Governor Andrew Cuomo, which has been criticized for making it too hard for judges to jail those most likely to offend again. A 2017 bail reform in New Jersey was explicitly designed not to have that problem. These charts show violent crime rates rising since bail reform in New York and falling in nearby New Jersey counties. They don't prove anything, but the contrast is interesting. One more thing that could be a factor, although I'm dubious, is that hundreds of thousands of asylum-seeking immigrants arrived in New York in 2022 and 2023, and the flow appears to have slowed sharply since. I'm dubious that this caused the crime wave because evidence from other states indicates that immigrants, even those who come here illegally, are less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. But the sudden inflow did tax the city's resources in ways that might have hampered crime fighting. Finally, there's one piece of really good news about crime in New York City. The most violent of violent crimes, murder, has fallen sharply since 2021. And if the nearly 30% decline so far this year continues, the city's murder rate will be the lowest since the 1940s, and among the lowest ever. Robbery and aggravated assault are by far the most common crimes, and thus drive fluctuations in violent crime rates. But it's good not to be murdered, and the risk of that happening to you in New York City is now much lower than in the rest of the country.